Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt. And again, thanks everyone for attending today. I know you got to take some time out of your schedule to do this. Looks like we have a lot of board members as well as managers on the call. And for those board members, I know you get paid a hefty salary to volunteer for your community. So again, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today to talk about some of these topics around reserves, reserve contributions, and things of that nature. As Matt sort of indicated, we're gonna talk about a few things here. I've generally broken it into sort of three themes. And so we'll first just look at and talk about just the operating budget in general, and then as well as diving into that reserve contribution component of it, and sort of uncover some aspects of those two items. And then I want to move into this this wonderful question that I've gotten over the years of generalized here. Why is our fee higher than our neighbors? I'll talk about this a lot more a little bit later, but that's sort of a theme that I've ran into over the years conducting these. And so that's really the meat of what I wanted to talk about today with everyone. And then after that, we'll sort of build upon that and talk about other aspects that impact funding needs for a community. And, if you look at the title we went with for this of, your association is unique, that's what this all is really going to revolve around. Hopefully helping you look at your community in a way slightly differently, because while of course we compare to peers and neighbors, because we want to make sure, we're maintaining our property value, and that, residents want to move into our neighborhood. So we're always, looking sort of across the road or down the road, so to speak. That's great, but we have to remember that realistically, each and every community is unique. And so that's sort of the flow of today. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. If I could just hop on a call with someone and say, tell me about your neighborhood, and then I can tell you exactly what you need to fund into your reserves, I would do that, and I'd probably charge a lot of money to do that. But the reality is that that's not really what's possible, and that's my hope is we sort of understand that and sort of understand the why behind that not really being possible as we work through today's presentation. And as Matt said, please use that Q&A. By the end of this presentation, I get bored of just talking to a blank screen, so I actually look forward to those questions. And again, we'll do our best to work through as many of those as possible. But no doubt, if we don't get to it, we'll have someone from our team reach out to you. Just a little bit of background. I mentioned I've had these questions over the years. I've been doing this just now 10 years, working at Reserve Advisors. I originally just did reserve studies. I now do some other things for our organization, but still get out and do these reserve studies. So really everything I'm talking about is simply based on that decade of working out there in the field with boards, with managers, and having these types of conversations. And real specifically, where this conversation or these topics typically come up is actually after we've conducted a reserve study, right? It's when I'm meeting with that board at a board meeting, or maybe we're presenting at an annual meeting in front of the entire membership, and without doubt, we get that hand raised from a member and they say, I know so-and-so who lives down here and they're only paying X. And so that's what we're really going to unpack and talk about today, why that really doesn't give you much to really compare. So what I have on the screen here is just two sample properties, right? It doesn't matter, I didn't put a high rise or mid rise on here, but I'm sure we have folks that live in that type of a structure. The point of what I want up here is I just want us to start thinking about just a general property. So we're going to I'll actually use this property on the left throughout our conversation this morning. And we don't need to know the details of it. That's not what matters. But if we think about it, we look at it, it's a townhome type neighborhood. There's, 18, 20 buildings. Since it's a townhome or condominium regime, that means, we're generally maintaining those building exteriors. You may see a little pool area in the center. And again, this is a satellite view. There's some fencing there, maybe there's some other minor things. The point is we want to sort of frame our discussion today, just keeping this sort of hypothetical neighborhood in mind. But do not worry, we're just using that as the talking point. If you live in a single family home community, if you live in a downtown high rise, the specific assets I may use as examples would change, but these concepts, I promise you, exactly apply. So maybe we're talking about siding, just ignore the word siding if you're in a high rise and think my masonry facade or my curtain wall facade or whatever it may be. But we're gonna look at this property and sort of walk through some of these questions that they may have. On the screen now, it's probably a bit small for you, but what I have, and it was a really long budget, so I had to split it up into small little chunks. And again, the details aren't what matter here, but I want to start here on the operating budget, right? Because when we think about this conversation of, so-and-so down the road pays X, first of all, that's typically not a statement just about their reserve contribution. And we're going to get to that, right? Because that's what we specialize in. We're reserve specialists. All we do is reserve studies, which give you guidance on reserve funding. But most often, from my experience, people are thinking about their total dues. They're saying, oh, I pay X per month. And that's what, as a homeowner, as a board member, when we're thinking about our friend down the road, we're thinking about what they pay per month, which is their total dues, which is their total operating budget. And so what I have here is a sample operating budget. And what I want to think about or walk us through is, let's take a look at this and maybe unpack some ways that a very similar looking property could have a different operating budget. So this one, again, you can't see the details maybe, but that's fine. I can sort of tell you the gist of it. It's about a $370,000 annual operating budget. Okay. Well, I looked through all of their expenses, and just like general R&M expenses, well, this is a gated townhome. So they have gates, they have a call box to get in, they have a little line item for minor repairs to those gates and the operators and the road, minor little work. And for them, that's about 2% of their annual operating budget. Now, of course, we got some money in the reserves for those assets, but this is just the operating side. So think about this neighborhood. Well, what if there's one right across the road and it looks almost the same, but it's just not gated, not private infrastructure? Well, that's about a 2% change in their operating budget. Well, that's not huge, but let's look at some other things. So then I thought, well, where are some of their other big ticket expenses on that operating budget? And I generalized a number of their line items just into this category of landscape and irrigation. Now we're getting into some sizable expenses. About 13% of this community's budget is tied up in landscape and irrigation related expenses. Again, we're not talking reserves yet. We're not talking about the capital replacement. We're just saying the normal day-to-day, paying their contractor to come and mow and put some annuals in, doing minor repairs on that irrigation system, things of that nature around landscape and irrigation, working out to about 13%. Again, let's compare to Bob down the road. They may have a more robust contract for more regular mowing, or they may have a bit more green space in you. It's not obvious, but lo and behold, they do. And maybe they're spending 20%, or conversely, they really don't have that much green space. They don't really care about freshening up the shrubbery all that often, and they may only spend about 5% of their operating budget. So as you drive down that road, you always feel, man, that's like the same property, and I know Bob lives over there and he's paying less than me. Well, they may not be spending as much on landscape and irrigation. Or actually, a really big one on this budget is I went and looked at their utilities. And I mean, this is where we can start to see huge swings. On this community, 37%, over a third of their dues are going towards utilities. Now you may think, Andrew, everyone's got to pay utilities, and you're right. But again, I've seen this. Some communities, they're going to have some centralized billing. So, the association may pick up all electrical costs. They don't have sub metering. So that's all rolled into their annual dues. They may roll in cable. They may have different expense rates on stormwater or sewage. And so all of these different components in the utility field could either be in your budget and not in someone else's, or vice versa. And you start to see, and there's a bunch of other line items. You start to see, this surface comparison, it really quickly breaks down, right? You really have to get into the weeds to be able to say, oh, that property is just like ours, right? Even if it's literally the same number of buildings, even if it's the same building, phase 1 and phase 2, he went across the road. You still, as a board, you get to build this budget. If you have professional management and with their support, you get to decide, do we want to spend a lot on this landscape? Do we want to try to save money? Are we professionally managed? On this budget, that's close to 10% of about 8% of their costs. So there's a lot of factors that go into an annual budget, which is your annual dues, that can start to really deviate what you as a homeowner are paying when you're trying to compare to someone down the road, right? And we're just scratching the surface here. Then that's all of our expenses in the operating budget. And then finally, that last little highlighted yellow line, it's almost always at the end of budgets, is that reserve contribution. So that's what we're specialists in. That's the real thing I can actually talk about, because when you get a reserve study, that's part of the purpose, is you're finding out from that reserve study annually, how much do we need to contribute to reserves? Okay. And so then that's what we're going to now focus more on, is that reserve contribution, and unpacking how much that can also swing for very, very similar properties. Now, just to frame that, because again, we got a number of folks on the call, so all different experience. And I'm not gonna go all the way into reserves 101. If we have some Q&A at the end for that, that's great. We can also send you some additional information if you're on this call saying, I don't even know what this reserve study thing Andrew's talking about. But just to lay a little groundwork for this, when we think reserve expenses, what are we saying should be spent from our reserve fund? I did want to cover briefly here what's generally called the 4-part test. And so all those examples I was just giving you, those are not reserve expenses. Those are operating expenses. When we think about reserves or capital expenses, it's got to pass these four criteria. The first one's straightforward, because we're talking about your association. So you have to legally maintain this asset. So that's what's important. It has to have a limited useful life. So if I'm at a brand new property, even if you maintain some asset that has a 100-year life, let's just go very vague here. It's such a long lifespan. We're not going to include that yet, because we don't need to start planning for that. If it doesn't have a predictable remaining useful life, we're not going to be able to target when it would be replaced. So that's not going to be captured in reserves. And then also this concept of a minimum threshold. So we want to make sure your CapEx schedule or your reserve expenditure schedule, it's getting the big ticket items. So a little $400, for a fire extinguisher that's in the lobby, we're not going to capitalize that as a reserve expense. So very broadly, when we're talking about reserve expenses, thinking about that townhome property, I showed you a picture. We'll come back to that momentarily. Reserve expenses are those roof replacements, repairs to that pool, repairs to those, or replacement of those entry gates, significant work to concrete or asphalt pavement, street infrastructure. Things like that are what we're talking about on this reserve expense side. And again, in a few slides, we're going to unpack how those can vary minorly or majorly, depending on just a few differences between two communities. Now, before we get to those, what I wanted to sort of draw attention to, again, just based on conversations that I've had over the years, is before maybe a board or homeowners are even trying to compare to other communities, there's this thought of, well, what should we be putting into reserves? That's a great question to be asking, right? You want to make an informed decision on an operating budget. That can be a sizable percentage. I didn't show you or call it out on that budget I had on a few slides ago, but again, that budget was a $370,000 budget. And from memory, I think their annual reserves were $95,000. So, that's a very sizable percent of their total annual budget. So and that's going to vary. If you're in a small HOA, it may be a really, really small percent, but understanding definitely for some folks on this call, your reserve contribution is a big, big number of your budget. So it's really important to ask the question, we what should that amount be? We want to be smart about it. And so that's a great question to ask. Where I see people get misguided is, and we have some examples on the screen here, is we're not asking the right question, or we're thinking about it the wrong way, right? So this thought of, well, maybe we have a lot of money in reserves. You have a huge bank account. So we probably could cut down our contributions. That's based on nothing. What is quote unquote a lot in the bank? If that's Andrew's bank account, yeah, it's probably a lot of money. But if that's your associations, you have millions of assets to replace, maybe it's not a lot. Thoughts like, oh, we've never contributed this much and we're going to put even more in next year. That we can't do that. Again, maybe yes, maybe no, but you're not making an informed decision. You're just speculating. I'm not going to read them all. You can see them on the screen. The point here is, these aren't getting at the core of what should we be putting into reserves? Like, how do we determine that? And really, I think a nice way to summarize that, and this is pulled from a document from CAI, so the Community Associations Institute. They have a nice document that actually talks about reserve study standards, which, very fun reading. And this is a document they put together that helps sort of explain and talk around those standards, because, sometimes standards can be a little hard to interpret. And it's sort of wordy, right? But I think it summarizes it really well. And it says, adequate replacement reserves, meaning your reserve account, your balance, the money you're holding on to. What is that? Well, they define it. They're saying you have that replacement reserve fund, so that bank account. And going into that fund, your contributions, we want them to be stable and equitable multi-year funding plans or contributions. So we want to set you on a path where that one line item in that budget, again, which for some associations could be 20, 30, 40% of their total annual expense, we want that to be relatively stable. We don't want that going up and down. You don't want that. Your homeowners don't want that. That's going to be very hard to weather. And the whole purpose of that, right, is offsetting the hopeful timely execution. So doing the capital major repair and replacements at the right time. And so that's going to be our whole goal, right, when we're developing reserve studies with those funding plans. And if we're succeeding at that, the last little nugget in here is we're doing that without reliance on additional supplemental funding, meaning we're not having to go get bank loans. We're not having to do special assessments. That's the goal, right? You can't promise what the future is, but that's what we're trying to do. But again, this is all in theory, because you can't just look at your property and know. And so similarly, you can't just, again, get to that annual meeting and go, my goodness, these dues are so high, and Bob down the road pays less, because that means nothing. So what do I have here? You go on Zillow, you never know how accurate it is, but I'm just showing you an example here where we feel like we're the exact same property. And the one on the left saying, hey, the monthly HOA dues are $394. The one on the right is $288. That doesn't make sense. Their buildings are similar. They have about the same size property. I think they've got a pool. We got a pool. We're all the same. So why do we pay so much more? Right. So what I want to stick with everyone is that first, or that earlier slide is, first of all, there's a lot of different things in your operating budget. That right there is going to send your annual dues in two different directions. But now let's think about that reserve contribution component. So I said I was going to come back to that sample property. And so that's what I have here. And again, we can stay high level with this. We don't have to think about and know the absolute details, but just to sort of give you a sense of what you're looking at on the left, this is a nice table where you can see the expense and contributions over time. So I do want to take a second to explain it. What you see is those red bars are those expenses by year. And hopefully, even if it's really small, you can get a sense that there's some years with no or very little expenses. There's some years with moderate or average expenses, and there's some years with huge expenses. And we could probably guess some of those big years of expenses are when the roofs get replaced. Maybe we have to re-side the buildings. Maybe we're repaving roads. We can sort of think about likely what those are. Again, the details don't specifically matter for our talk today because this is a sample. It's not your community, so it doesn't matter. But you sort of see how those expenses can be really high to almost nothing in some years. And thinking back to what I just said a moment ago, that's going to be balanced by those relatively stable, equitable contributions, those green bars that you see. And, relatively, they're slowly climbing for inflationary adjustments. But you see those green contributions every year, they're not going up and down, up and down. And just here's a little table where you can see that. So again, just for talking purposes, we see that for this community in 2024, their annual reserve contribution is going to be 117, 121, 25. And we're going to keep that table on the next few slides here. Because what I want to show you, is I took that study. It's a real study we conducted, and I made minor tweaks to it. And so the reason I did this is, we're always comparing to a neighborhood down the road. That's certainly not identical. But I thought, let's take this community and let's make this hypothetical identical neighboring community and just change little things. And by changing, maybe I shouldn't call them little, but by changing certain things, what I want you to sort of witness today is how that can have an effect. And some of these are going to have major effects, some are going to have more minor, but you're going to see, even with an absolutely identical community, with just a few tweaks, the funding needs are going to start changing, right? So the first thought I had is, let's say you have less money in the bank. So this original study on the left, again, that table's not going to change. They had about 150,000 at the beginning of our study. So in my alternate universe one that's going to be on the right here, they had way less. They only had 15,000. So most of you on the call probably could guess what would happen here is they're going to need to fund more, right? So with this adjustment, everything else is identical, just they don't have as much money as their peer community. Well, now they're going to put 128,000 away instead of 117. And we're just going to look on that next year to simplify. We don't need to talk about every single year. So right off the bat, when you're driving on the neighborhood, Bob pays less. Well, what's their financial position? Have they been reserving well over the years, or have they not been? Right? That's going to start to cause deviations between you and them. So next we want to look at is, what if we're not absolutely identical? And so I said, well, let's take the pool area out. Now that would be obvious, hey, they don't have a pool, we have a pool, but just for talking purposes here, let's see what that does. So certainly you can presume it's going to lower their funding needs if we're removing assets. And it's not nearly as impactful, but you see that they have to put less away. And we could have gone the other way. I could have said, well, what if there's 2 pool areas? Or what if they also then had, a bocce ball court or a tennis court? These different amenities. When you're driving down, talking to Bob, you don't think much of them, but they all add up, right? If you have a little bit more of amenities, a few more tennis courts or whatever it may be, there's more funding needed. If you have less, which is what I'm modeling here, then there's a little bit less needed. Again, point here is trying to drive home is, you're really not the same as anybody else out there. The next one, is I think a helpful one, because this is, remember, that townhome property, and it is gated, and so it has private street infrastructure. So captured in that reserve study is replacement of those gates, the gate operators, the call box, repairs to the streets and curbing and things of that nature, because that's all private. So, well, what if across the road, identical property, just not private streets? You sort of see where this is going is, well, now they're going to have a lower reserve contribution. In this case, it went down almost $15,000 per year. So just making these tweaks, modifying little things, is going to have an impact. Last one here, very significant impact. And this is, in ways, I think, the most realistic. All this is hypothetical anyways, but what I modeled here is poor condition. And this is probably what we actually run into in a way in the field more often, where we have similar, not identical as in this model here, but similar properties, maybe even similar age, and they have wildly different funding. Really, the first example, which is different starting balances, that definitely happens a lot, compounded with this where, the property across the road, they've just not maintained those roofs well at all. And so I accelerated these roofs, I think just 5 years. Maybe it was 6 years. And you see just how significant. And I know it's really small, but you look at those charts down at the bottom, right? Look at those red bars. They slid way to the left. I brought that roof replacement up. Everything else identical. Same starting balance. Every other asset's exact same. I just said for the neighborhood on the right, said, hey, you're not gonna get your full life out of your roofs, one of your biggest assets. And that has obliterated the comparison between the two. It is going from 117,000 of an annual reserve contribution to 275,000. Even if I had just moved those roofs 1 or 2 years earlier, we would have seen a pretty significant adjustment, right? So point that I'm trying to showcase here is, even when I take the exact same property and modify tiny bits and pieces of it, you start to see, you no longer can compare. They're not the same property. And so then when we think about the real world, where it's actually very rare that you have the exact same buildings, the exact same number, everything the same with just one minor tweak, you realize in the real world, there's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more that's different between you and Bob's neighborhood. You start to understand, go back to what we titled this, is that your community is unique. And the reality is, looking across the road, down the road, the other side of town, can you learn from other communities? Sure. But is it really going to give you that much insightful information of how to run your community, how to set your budget, how to maintain your property? It's really not. Okay. So let's sort of continue this on of what else can impact our funding needs. And what I put on here, and I'll explain it, there's a bunch of numbers, but I just took a property that had sided buildings, and the left set of numbers is if it was fiber cement or hardy board, hardy plank is sort of the trade name you'll hear. If that's the type of siding it had versus wood siding. And now I'm an engineer and I can get excited by numbers. But I'll sort of generalize what's going on here is from the road, this looks in essence the same. It looks like siding of a wood type nature on the buildings. If it's fiber cement or wood from a distance, you're not going to really even notice the difference. But these are different assets. Siding, fiber cement has a decently longer useful life. It also does cost a little more, but it lasts longer. And then that's for replacement, but we also got to paint or something. Well, it's about the same to paint either siding material, but natural wood, you have to paint more regularly. So what you see at the very bottom of this table is just an annualized cost of ownership. It's just a way to compare, excuse me, it's a way for you to compare how using a different material, in this case, is going to sort of affect you over the long term. It's just annualizing that cost. It doesn't mean that's what you would put into reserves, but you see this difference of that fiber cement over its lifespan is costing you around $12,000 a year, whereas that wood's costing you $17,000. Excuse me. So again, another parameter where it feels like we're the exact same as Bob's neighborhood, but in a way, a small detail, at least from a distance, can start to change your funding considerations. An example I wanted to put together, this is going to really be applicable for any of our high-rise folks, maybe even some of our mid-rises. And if you're an HOA or townhome, you can sort of turn your ears off for a minute. But it's thinking about our HVAC. And, I've worked with plenty of downtown properties, neighboring or in the same downtown core. One has a central HVAC plant. And real quickly, generally what I mean is, they have a cooling tower, some chillers, some heat exchangers, pumping, heating and cooling water through the building, so a bunch of fan coil units. In essence, the association, in real general terms, is sort of picking up all the assets for heating and cooling through the whole building. Well, if that's an association asset, there's a big cost to replace those. There's sizable maintenance costs on those. Excuse me. And so that's going to be captured in your reserve study. That's going to be also captured some of that R&M in your operating budget. Whereas I then I've worked with almost a neighboring property where each homeowner has their own little water heater. Each homeowner has their own little split system, their own HVAC system. There's no central HVAC plant. There's some other mechanicals, but the heating and cooling of each unit is fully borne by that unit owner out of their own pocketbook. So what's that mean? Nothing in their reserve study is being set aside because there's no chillers, there's no cooling towers, there's no major HVAC pumps. Nothing in the operating budget is for the R&M of these assets. So right there, huge swing in what that operating budget, what that reserve contribution could look like, right? Even though you look and you go, wow, these are pretty similar buildings. And then hopefully by now you sort of understand, even when we feel they're similar buildings, we recognize, well, there's probably actually a lot that's different under the hood. Sort of wrapping up here and getting just some other sort of conceptual things to think about. What else can really impact those funding needs? So age of community. And what I mean by this is, I think most of us would agree, if your community is brand new and Bob's is 30, 40, 50 years old, you're not going to be making comparisons. You expect there's going to be a lot more issues at his, so on and so forth. But where this can be tricky is when it's not that big. Maybe your neighborhood's 5 years old, Bob's is 10, 12, 15 years old. It's not going to look that much old, right? A decade of age difference in the young to middle years of a community, it's not going to be wildly apparent. But yet, let's think about the roofs. His roofs are 15 years old, yours are 5. His are going to be due soon, yours aren't, or vice versa. That age difference can sort of sneak up on you, meaning maybe there's a lot of assets that are in a near-term replacement for you or for Bob, vice versa. That's going to really drive funding in a different direction. Sort of hit on this earlier, but maintenance practices. So the example, sort of using the roofs again, where I accelerated them, I made a passing comment of, they didn't maintain them well, right? The concept of good preventative maintenance. Now, this can apply to mechanical systems, right? Like in a mid-rise, high-rise application. Elevators, pumps, HVAC, good PM on that, but this also applies in the townhome type sector. Good PM inspections regularly on roofs, preventative work even on some of your road and other infrastructure. Spending those monies, one, are going to make your annual operating budget more compared to a neighbor that doesn't. But the whole point of that is hopefully to extend life. So then your reserve contributions may be a little less because you get a longer lifespan out of your assets. Apologies for my cough. I'm getting over a cold, trying to get through the end of this for you guys. Then size of community. So this is a fun one to think about because I'm not talking about you have 100 homes, Bob has 1,000. You know he's got a lot more amenities and things of that nature. But let's go a bit smaller. Let's think about a basic HOA with one pool area. You have 100 homes, Bob has 300 homes. Let's just think about the pool area, nothing else. Each homeowner in your neighborhood is paying a 100th, 1/100th of that pool. You're splitting it amongst 100 homeowners. Bob's splitting that amongst 300 homeowners. It's going to cost him a third per homeowner that you're splitting. So these deviations, more minor deviations of number of units in a community to sort of spread the cost around, going to really have an impact. I mean, that could actually have a profound impact of you having 100 homes, he having 300, and everything else being identical, right? So that can really swing what you as an individual is spending. Again, the total budget would probably be identical, but you're spending it among 100 people, he's spending it among 300. Level of amenities, sticking with the pool, if you have one, he has two. Your mid-rise, your mid-rise has a tiny lobby and really small hallways. Bob's has a lobby, a gym, big hallways, a party room. All these things are sort of subtle from the outside. They start to really swing what you need to expend, what that reserve contribution is going to be. Then we think hidden infrastructure, things we don't think about. You may have privately maintained subsurface utilities. You're an old community built in the 70s, excuse me, and now you're spending money on stormwater pipe replacement, maybe some pipe relining, whereas Bob's, it's all municipality maintained. It's out of sight, out of mind, and you have different ownership responsibility. Now we're getting into wildly different things that certainly driving on the road, you're not thinking about. Bob's probably thinking a lot about if he's having to expend those monies. And then finally, like scope of assets, sort of ties back to an example I gave a moment ago, but let's stick with that mid-rise or high-rise application. You can have almost identical buildings. You have 3 elevators, they have 4 or 5. Elevators, or any of our mid-rise, high-rise folks on the call, when you modernize those elevators, that is a major project. And if you've got 3, someone down the road, similar size building has 5, they're going to be spending a lot more money, right? So point of all this today, and then we'll wrap up here. Hopefully by now you see your association is unique. And there's really no way to look at someone down the road and say, we should be paying the same, we should be paying less than that. There's no way to go online and read, how much should I put in reserves? There's way too many parameters that are going to impact that. Have some points on the screen. It's really just summarizing what I covered thus far. And so I said at the beginning, and hopefully no one was surprised back then, and by now I don't think you are, there is not a crystal ball. I can't tell you how much you should or shouldn't be putting in. I can't tell you, is $300,000 a lot to have in your reserve account? I have no idea. You have no idea. Bob has no idea, right? What we want to do is, we want you to be focusing on your own community, right? You need to manage your community, run your community, maintain those assets, and plan for those assets. And that's really the takeaway I want to leave here today with is, and as board members on the call, you may already mostly be locked into this concept, but unfortunately your homeowners are coming to you with this, the Bob's neighborhood or whatnot. So hopefully from this conversation today gives you some talking points, right? Able to sort of think through and articulate to your membership, your fellow homeowners, neighbors, why, hey, I'd love to pay less. I'd love if our dues were as low as so-and-so's, but let's think about how different we are. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what Bob's neighborhood has. We have what we have. We are what we are. We're at the funding levels we're at now. We're at the age, we're at the condition. We just need to focus on where we're at today and sort of plan for the future moving forward. So with that, I think I gave us a lot of time for Q&A. I'll let sort of Matt start working through those and hopefully answer some of your questions. Before we get into that, again, I just want to say thank you for everyone for attending this today. Apologies, you had to listen to me cough through this whole thing. As I said, got over a cold earlier this week. So I appreciate your grace on that. So with that, Matt, what are some questions I could answer here?